If you've been listening to the Eat More Carbs podcast recently, you know Reilly and I are both in the middle of marathon training. This week, we wanted to highlight some of the things that we are doing to make sure we're ready for race day. Today's episode, we are covering skin health for athletes. Reilly and I are both making sure that we're mindful and we make sure to prep our skin before our long runs in the sun. In addition to skin prep, we're also making sure that we're properly fueled for our runs, which includes carbohydrates and 2Before.
2Before is an all-natural pre-workout designed to enhance athletic performance through the benefits of New Zealand blackcurrant berries. Studies have shown these berries to increase vasodilation and prime the body to kickstart muscle recovery. These antioxidant-rich berries have a sweet and tangy flavor and will level up your performance and recovery. Use code Reilly for 20% off 20 packs and multi-serve packs online at 2before.com.
This is the Eat More Carbs podcast. Hello and welcome to the Eat More Carbs podcast. My name is Jenna Fisher and I'm here with my co-host Reilly Beatty. Today we have nurse practitioner in dermatology, Mercy, on to answer some questions. Mercy, for people who don't know you, can you take just a couple minutes and share just a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Mercy. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'm a nurse practitioner. As Jenna said, I work in dermatology. I was a nurse first at RN. I have my bachelor's degree, and I worked actually as a nurse for about 8 years before I decided to go back to school. It took me some time to figure out what I wanted to do, how I wanted to specialize, but I really fell in love with working in a dermatology clinic as a RN, so I wanted to do more. As a nurse practitioner, I can see patients on my own, I can prescribe, I can diagnose, I treat skin cancers, all of the things, and I have the best job in the world, but maybe I'm biased.
I know I speak for both Reilly and I. We are so excited to have you on the podcast to help answer some questions about skin, about things that we'd love to know about. Before we get into some of those questions, though, we're going to do our high and low section where we just share a little bit about our week, the good and maybe the not so good. Reilly, as always, can you kick us off?
My high for the week. Women's basketball is like having a moment right now, and I am all for it. It has been so fun to watch, like March Madness, and like now having a daughter, like it's so exciting to like see the world of sports like for a woman. So that's my high. Low is I went and got like a really, like I thought it was a cute haircut. Like the hairdresser did such a great job on my hair. She cut a lot off. I'm trying to get ahead of like postpartum hair loss, but I didn't realize that now I cannot put it in a ponytail because it is too short. I have to rock pigtails. I'm rocking pigtails right now because I cannot put my hair in a ponytail and it can't be down all the time. Not really great foresight on my side, but
I like the pigtails. I
I
think they're
was
cute.
going to compliment the pigtails. I really like them too.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, guys. Maybe I'll keep the pigtails. But I just thought it was funny because I went to put my hair in like a ponytail and it like two strands were in the ponytail.
Reilly, just join like the clip life where you just like pull it back in a little clippy.
Yeah. I'm going to have to do that because one of the first things I did when I moved to South Carolina was cut my hair short because it is so humid here and I didn't want it like sticking. I'm going to have to join the clip life, get it all slicked back.
You could throw it back to your soccer days and just use some pre-wrap. Yeah, it was pre-wrap. I was like, it is pre-wrap, right? That we all used to put in our hair and then we wear it all the time.
And then you used to wear it on your neck?
Yep.
Yes.
Mercy, what about you? High and low?
I think my high this week was, so my son just started he's playing JV lacrosse. He's in 9th grade. This is like new for him, new sport for him. So he just joined. Their team played a shutout game on Monday and was just so exciting to watch. And our weather, I'm here in Maryland, like finally warmed up. So it was like this beautiful day outside, a great game. And I was like, this is awesome. So it's been a good week. My low, I was struggling to come up with a low because it's been a really good week. And then my patient today told me that my scrub color was very boring and drab and it's making me look old. So there's, I guess, a purpose for everything, but sometimes you wonder why people say the things that they say.
I like the scrubs. Come on. I think that that person wasn't giving you enough credit.
So I'm going to keep wearing them, but can't please
You look great. You look very young and youthful in your scrubs.
Thanks.
I will just wrap up our high and low section real quick. My high is that I made a delicious dinner last night and I cannot wait to share the recipe because I think it's so good. If you have like picky eaters in your family, this is a great way to incorporate color, carbs, and protein in a single dish. So I'm super excited about this because it's like one of my favorite takes on like a favorite food of mine, I guess. So I'm very excited about that. My low is more of a funny story than it is a low. I was taking my dog George out. I know so many things happen to me when I take George outside, but there was a delivery person out there trying to find a specific house in our little community. And he was asking me directions to get to this house. And I gave this poor individual the completely wrong directions, but I didn't realize it until after I got back inside. And then it hit me that I was like, I just told him to go the wrong way. So I felt really bad about that. But I guess the moral of the story is never ask me for directions because I am going to point you the wrong way. When you ask me, what direction is this house? I'm like, it's over there. It's, yeah, definitely down that street. And no, it was not. Not at all. So I'm so sorry to the UPS driver who I pointed in the wrong direction.
He's like, does she even live here?
Oh, yeah. He's probably like, that girl had no idea where she was.
Well, Mercy, we're so excited to have you here. We are athletes ourselves, that's what we like to say, and we have lots of questions for you about like athlete skincare, and especially like growing up, being outside all the time, playing soccer, swimming, and all the fun outdoor activities. We definitely got a lot of sun damage, so we'd love to pick your brain.
What are some of the most common skin issues that athletes face due to their training?
Yeah, so I was trying to narrow it down to the most common, and I think that it's either rashes or acne, and I realized that rashes is like the most broad term in dermatology, but I'm going to go with like the sweat or friction induced rashes, or the ones from contact like ringworm, fungal infections, or even warts, and then acne, of course, from friction and sweating and occlusion, all of those fun things.
Does athlete's foot fall into that? Because when I think of like athlete's foot, I associate it with being an athlete, but like my understanding is not that that's isolated to being an athlete. Like anybody can get athlete's foot. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. I actually diagnosed this in someone the other day, and he was like, well, I'm not an athlete, so it can't possibly be. And I was like, well, that's just sort of the colloquial term for it. It's a fungal infection of the skin that you can get whether you're an athlete or not. But the warmth and the moisture is really what like those little microbes love to munch on. So when you are an athlete, you've got a higher risk of it. So that's, I think, where the terminology came from. But anybody can.
What are some maybe preventative measures that athletes can take to avoid some of those common skin conditions that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to answer this, I think, in two parts in terms of like the rashes from contact, right? So like the fungal rashes, the athlete's foot, or the warts. So these are contracted from skin to skin contact or fomites, where you come into contact with something where that organism was, and then you contract it onto your skin. So like, of course, the easy answer is excellent hand washing and sanitizing, wiping down your equipment before and after use if you're in like a shared area for sure. Don't walk barefoot on those public room floors or in locker rooms. Get the shower shoes. It's worth it. Way easier to prevent these things. And then like, they're all very easily treatable as well, but just much easier if you don't even get it in the first place. And then like when you're using sports equipment that other people do share, so like wrestlers on the mats and things like that, just all of the possible ways to wipe things down so that they're clean before your body comes into contact with it is the best prevention for sure. On the other end, the rashes that are driven by sweat and friction. So these are like the yeast rashes that come from the overgrowth of those when we're sweaty, we're warm, we're wearing equipment that's tight to our body, showering as soon as possible after the workout, after the game, after the tournament, whatever it may be, is really the best thing. Like don't hang out in those sweaty, tight, like bike shorts or the leggings, especially, or in guys, like the tighter athletic shorts. Those are like the perfect breeding ground for these things to start. And if you can't shower right away, just changing into like loose, comfortable clothing to take off the sweaty stuff can even be helpful just in and of itself. And then there's something that's getting a lot of buzz on social media. I don't know if you guys have seen it or if I'm getting the buzz like in the derm world, but hypochlorous acid spray is like a really old medicine, but it's a new trend. It's essentially super dilute bleach solution. So we use this like on babies with infected eczema for years, but now it's in like a cosmetic spray you can buy at Sephora, for example, and you spritz that on the areas that are prone to like your acne or your rashes when you can't shower right away. And that can be preventative as well. Some things are old and good and they get a little facelift, and I'm like, all right, it's not even the new kid on the block, but it feels like the new kid on the block. And then when we talk about like the acne side of things, so like those are the rashes with acne from athletes or playing athletic sports sports, all the things. The friction and the sweat and wearing the equipment causes the little follicles to get clogged up. So like, again, showering right away is helpful, not hanging around in the tight clothing, wiping out the sports equipment. So like the helmets, the chin straps, those sorts of things, keeping them clean is really important. This is the same sort of thing that caused like maskne in the peak of the pandemic. We're wearing masks all day. You get that friction, the sweat on the skin. Athletes are dealing with this on a daily basis, and it can be really frustrating and harder to treat. So just doing all of those things can be helpful. Showering with a benzoyl peroxide wash is an acne cleanser. Those are all great ways to help prevent. And then come to Derm if that's not working, and we'll treat you.
I have a personal question because I'm an athlete and I've never been an athlete that's necessarily had to wear equipment, but I understand the importance of washing my face, washing places that have touched equipment, things like that. What is like your recommendation? Because I never know what to do when I'm like have an early morning workout. It's like 6 a.m. I'm like, am I supposed to wash my face before and then after and then at night? Like this seems like a lot of washing my face, but like I don't want to get acne and I'm sweating a lot. So I guess what is your recommendation there?
That's a really good question. My answer is going to depend. Do you work out inside or outside, or does it depend?
I work out in a gym.
Okay. So if you're working out in a gym at 6 a.m. and the sun is barely even up, this is when you get the free pass. You don't need to cleanse. You don't need to do anything. Just go to the gym and do your workout. After the gym, I would wash your face because that's when it's important, or take your shower. And then you're going to want to put on your skin, your skincare, your moisturizer, your sunscreen for the day. If you're working out at home, I would say same advice. But if you're going, for example, for a run outside, especially a long distance run, and the sun will be up, I would say you don't need to do the cleanse, but just put your sunscreen on before you go out. And then after you're done, come in, wash, shower, etc. And then you would reapply for the day. But washing before and after and then in the evening, that would feel really excessive. Less is more.
Okay, so is there such a thing then as like overwashing your face?
There is. If you were to wash like several times throughout the day and that not counterbalance it with moisturizer, you could really strip your skin out. This, I think, is seen less on the face, and more often when we get eczema on the hands, it's from overwashing a lot of the time. There's other factors too, but you can absolutely strip your skin from overwashing it. Showering frequently without reapplying moisturizer, hot water, all of that can absolutely do it.
I'm feeling that on my hands right now because I have to wash so many bottles.
Yes. So super common, right? With a newborn, with an infant, you're washing all the time. Wear dishwashing gloves. It will save you. My favorite one for those are the cotton lined ones. Mr. Clean makes them. I think there's other brands too, but Mr. Clean has a pair that are on Amazon. They're very well priced. They work well and they last forever. They're like very durable. So those are the ones I wear because my hands get torn up from all the sanitizer and washing all day. I do dishes and I'm like, my hands are done.
Great tip. It's so easy and simple. I mean, that's what we always talk about with nutrition, but like that's something that's so simple that's preventative. You talked about this a little bit, but how does like exposure to sunlight and outdoor elements during training or competition, how is that going to affect our like skin health?
Great question. This applies to athletes as well as anybody who spends a significant amount of time outdoors, no matter the reason. If you work outside, have a job that leaves you outdoors often, that sort of thing. So we know for sure, hands down, exposure to the sun and UV affects the skin health by increasing the risk of skin cancer as well as aging of the skin. So our body's natural defenses are spending their energy in trying to clean up the damage that has been done by the UV. If you wear sunscreen and keep your skin protected, your body then can focus on its efforts in repairing things instead of just trying to clean this up constantly. So the skin will definitely suffer over time if you're not using good protection like adequately. And then like I think of the athletes too, or like the ultra long runners who are in the sun sweating for many, many hours at a time, or like these baseball tournaments. I think of like my nephew just plays baseball and they're like in the sun all day long. So oftentimes reapplying sunscreen or redoing the things when you're sweating them off is missed, even if it's done at the initial start of it or beforehand.
Okay, I have two questions about sunscreen.
Yeah.
One is specifically from your Instagram page, which is how much sunscreen do we need to put on our face? Because I think that that's something that maybe we all miss out on or maybe don't use enough of. And you had a great Instagram reel about how much sunscreen we should be using. How much do we need to put on our face? And then my second question is, I will be very honest. When I was growing up, I was a swimmer. I was outside a lot. I was a lifeguard. I took my summer tan as a badge of honor and I hated sunscreen. Is there a way that now, as someone who is very concerned about like my skin health, like can I reverse those potential damaging things that I did when I was a teenager and did not listen to my dermatologist?
Yes, for sure. So in terms of amount or volume, so yes, the reel you were mentioning, I show it kind of in visual form. So if you're using a sunscreen that's like a cream or lotion form, about 2 or 3 finger lengths of product, depending on the consistency of it. So like if it's super thin and runny, it might be like running off your finger if you try to measure this. If you put it in a measuring spoon, a 1/4 teaspoon to a 1/2 teaspoon is about enough for the face, ears, and neck. So a lot of us, myself included, before I worked in Derm, did not know that that was the amount that I should be using. And I would get my little bit and put it on like moisturizers. I have pretty oily skin. I don't use a ton of moisturizers. And I'm like, oh, I'm protected for the whole day and maybe tomorrow. So I was a lifeguard as well. I also wore my tan as a badge of honor. We all did those things and now we know better. So we learn from it and you can absolutely repair the damage that's been done with good sun protection. So one of my favorite studies to reference was done with a woman. They actually measured like the levels of sun damage in her skin. Either they took pictures or they took like skin biopsies. And then they had her use sunscreen only. They didn't do any other lasers, any peels, like no other interventions. And after a year, the damage in her skin was actually reversed by simply just wearing sunscreen every day and then reapplying as well. So I always lean on that as like, listen, all hope is not lost. What's done is done. We can't go back in time. This applies to everything in life, like nutrition too, right? Like we learn better, we know better, and then now we just move forward. And then if you want to up the ante using things like retinoids are great for anti-aging, like retin-A, tretinoin, and then there's lasers and other things that can be done to really like get through more layers of the skin if needed. But it is not that we did these things, we made our mistakes, and then there's no hope left in the world. Like that's just not true. There is hope.
I'm shocked right now. I'm shocked at how much sunscreen I'm supposed to be wearing on my face. I'm shocked and I'm not doing it.
I feel like that's why I made that video. I'm like, people need to see this visually because if you don't see it visually, you just don't know. And I tell people this and they're like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll put enough on. And I'm like, if you're getting sunburned through your sunscreen, you probably didn't put enough on. Like that's kind of the baseline of it. Again, like it's easy not to use enough. Reapplying sunscreen, give or take about every 2 hours. If you're swimming or sweating and then towel drying, just reapplying after you've like dried off is smart because you've essentially wiped it off. My best advice though is find an SPF that you love so that you want to wear it. So if you have one, you're like, I love the way this makes my skin looks. It feels really good. It's not greasy and gross and heavy. Like that is the magic because then you'll want to put it on. You'll want to use enough of it. And if you're using a formula where you're like 3 finger lengths is disgusting and feels horrible on my skin, you're not going to wear it. Why would you? You need a new formula that feels good for you. And there's so many good sunscreens now. I actually have a list in my bio on my Instagram page that's like probably 60 different sunscreens separated by category. So whatever category you're looking for, there's probably one on there to find.
Is there a way that you can share that with us so that way we can link that list in the show notes for this podcast?
Yeah, it's a Google Doc.
Personally, I want to look at that, but
I'm running right now to your bio. Like I'm running.
I'm like pulling up your Instagram as we speak to look at this because I'm like, I need all the skin protection.
Yeah, I used to hate the way sunscreen felt, and I have oily skin. I had acne growing up for years. Actually, it was worse in my 20s than when I was young. And I didn't want to use things that felt gross on my skin. I thought it would make me break out, so I'd avoid it. And now I'm just like, I know that's wrong. And I want other people to know, like, they don't need to have something that feels gross. We just need to find them something that they like.
On that topic of skin damage and things like that, when should people maybe seek out seeing someone like you for skin checks? Like, is this something that we should be doing regularly? How often should we be doing that? When should maybe we come to you if we're thinking that like it's more of a skin problem versus like maybe just an irritation?
That's a really good question. I actually get asked that all the time. There's not an arbitrary answer to this. It kind of comes down to risk level. So I'm going to break it down into like what the risk factor exposures are, and then who needs to see us more often. The easy answer is, if you're not sure, just come see us. We'll do your baseline and then tell you how often you should be seen. Because sometimes I'm finding, like, for example, a melanoma in my patient, and then it's not what they came in for. It was something else. So if you're ever not sure and you're like, I don't know, should I? Just come. We'll handle it, then we'll tell you what to do. But in terms of like the risk and the frequency, so like number one, fair skin, such as myself, light skin, blue eyes, blonde hair. Reilly, join the crew. We're at the highest risk. Those folks typically need to see us sooner or more often, just because our skin shows sun damage more quickly. We don't have a lot of natural protection. And then number two, if someone has multiple moles, like more than 50 or 100 moles, we start the screenings at whatever age that might be. So I have, for example, some late teens that are in this category. They just have so many moles, it's impossible to keep track of yourself. We start the screening whenever you hit that period of time. We're like, okay, and then we'll do it usually annually from that. Having multiple moles or multiple atypical moles does increase the risk for melanoma. So that's where that guideline comes from. And then speaking of melanoma, a first degree family member, so a parent or a sibling, will generally do annual screenings for their first degree family members because their risk is higher as well. And then a personal history of skin cancer, of course, they're going to be seeing us regularly. And then in the like athlete side, history of blistering sunburns, people who have significant sun exposure, folks who used tanning beds either previously or currently are at increased risk of melanoma. And then people who just generally like work outside or playing sports frequently outside or having a lot of that outdoor exposure, worth to get that baseline exam just to see. And then usually we'll determine, is it once a year, once every couple of years if things look good, and we could figure out what. I have some people like I see them every 3 months, and some people I see every 3 years, or just if there's something new. So in terms of things to look out for in regards to skin cancer, so I think melanoma is probably the best published in terms of the ABCDEs. If you've heard anything about a skin cancer, it would be those guidelines. So something that's asymmetrical, the borders are irregular, the diameter is evolving, it's getting bigger, changing over time, or something that's bleeding. The other part of this, if you have a lesion on your body that just doesn't look like everything else, that's something that stands out. We call that the ugly duckling. That's also something that's worth getting checked because it doesn't quite match with what your skin is growing. And then the non-melanoma skin cancer, so your basal cell, your squamous cell, those are actually significantly more common than melanomas. And those can look like a pink spot, a rash that doesn't go away, the lesion that never heals, oh yeah, that's been there for 3 months and it didn't heal. I'm like, that's a problem. That's a concern. So if you have those sorts of things, they may not look like much visually, but those are typically how the skin cancers start in terms of presentation.
Those are all things that I'm so glad you shared, because I want to know what to look for and what I should maybe seek out seeing a dermatologist for if and when I have something pop up that I'm like, what's going on here? Because that preventative side of things, I feel like maybe you can touch on this too, that getting in front of maybe some type of a skin cancer or skin condition is probably better than like avoiding going to see you because we're maybe afraid of a diagnosis or something like that.
100%. The earlier, the better in pretty much everything in medicine. And I am a big fan of prevention and protection. And let's keep this from being a problem before it is. The earlier we find it, the best case scenario. These are all very treatable when they're found early. I have had folks, though, that are afraid of getting a diagnosis, I think, or they live in denial and they let something go for months, years, even. Someone finally drags them in, and I'm like, this wouldn't have been such a big problem if we addressed this early. So I agree. Just come in if you're worried. Don't be afraid of getting a diagnosis. It's much better to treat it and know what you're treating than to be ignoring something that's potentially a problem. And then if it's safe to ignore, I'm a big fan of that. I'm like, do you just want permission to ignore this? This is not a problem. You don't need to worry about it. I love giving reassurance. Those are my favorite visits. I'm like, oh, I get to give you good news. Love it.
There's so many parallels with nutrition and all of that, right? Like us getting ahead of, things like disordered eating or, having somebody develop a good feeling foundation and good habits so they're not at risk for disordered eating and things like that. There's just so many parallels there. So I'm so happy that you brought that up.
Can I touch on a couple other preventative things that aren't sunscreen that I think are a little bit underrated in terms of sun protection?
I was about to ask. So
Yeah.
Please.
So like sunscreen is sunscreen, right? But in the other forms of sun protection, UV protective clothing is amazing and takes away all the guesswork of wearing sunscreen and reapplying. So that's actually one of my advices for my athletes who are in the sun for a long time, like at these hour-long tournaments where they may not be reapplying. I'll also give some suggestions for how to reapply sunscreen, but the UV protective clothing is like an athletic material. It's typically sweat wicking, dries easily, and feels kind of sporty to wear, so it doesn't look awkward or out of place. They make cute things now, and then there's even like swimwear and hats that are made out of the UV protection. You'll see those will get rated UPF versus sunscreen is SPF. So the UPF, almost everything clothing is going to be 50 or higher, and if you are wearing that, you don't need sunscreen underneath of it. It's going to give you full protection, and then you don't need to reapply. So I love the long sleeves for sports players because then you don't even need to worry about your arms.
These are super cute too.
They are. They are. And so many companies have done a really nice job of doing the testing on their materials, because a lot of materials do protect from the sun, and then they'll do the testing so that they can advertise it. For example, a cotton t-shirt, you're probably not going to burn through it, but I want to say it's like a SPF 5 or 10 maybe, so it's not great protection. So those are the things to think about if you are out in the sun for a long time. Just make sure you're doing one of the UPF ones, and then you'll know that you're protected. And then with like hats and sunglasses, same thing. Sunglasses, almost all of them now have the UV protection built into them, even the cheap ones on Amazon. So I would say there's no reason to wear a pair of sunglasses that don't have UV protection in them. I don't even know if you can find them, but if you do, toss them. Even the cheap ones that are like $10 for a 3-pack should do you well. You don't need to spend a bunch of money on this stuff either. And then one of the other forgotten areas is the scalp and the part line. So if you are a chronic hair parter when you are out in the sun, the scalp can sunburn very easily, very quickly. It is quite sensitive, and the less hair that you have on top of your head, so my gentlemen and women that are thinning really need to be careful and cautious about using the scalp sunscreens as well, or just spraying or using the stick on their scalp also. And then in the same turn, the sports that wear visors, so like golf and tennis, I try to convince my patients in those sports to wear the hat and not the visor. The baseball caps like aren't covering the ears or even the tip of the nose, but it's better than nothing and will at least keep the scalp protected, because I see so many skin cancers in the scalp. You're going to have a scar in your scalp and lose the hair in that area where it is. So prevention here is, I think, just so important, and it's a forgotten area too.
I'm so sad. I love my visor when I run, but I'm going to switch to a hat just because you
Switch
said so.
to a hat. And then the other thing I was going to mention was in terms of reapplication. So when we talk about like volume of sunscreen, you get your 2 to 3 finger lengths, you have your 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon, you put it on before you go outside, and then you're outside for more than 2 hours. That sunscreen, the way that it works is it forms a film on the skin. So eventually it just starts to break down from sweat, from friction, from rubbing, and then just simply time. Even if you do nothing to it, it will lose its effectiveness. So I think the best application is using like a lotion, a cream, a serum, a like physical one on the skin first. And then if you're going to reapply, the stick sunscreens are fantastic for the sports bags because they don't melt. You can reapply without needing to even touch your skin with your hands. So if you're wearing equipment and things, it makes it easy. Or the sunscreen sprays, if you can spray it liberally enough and then rub it in once you do. So those are perfect on the go. They're not as ideal because you really need to use a lot of a stick to get that adequate protection out of it. You would need to swipe an area so many times to get that volume, but it's better than nothing. And there are some great ones that are like sweat resistant and pretty darn water resistant and great in the sun. I have one by Shiseido. It's like truly 100% clear. It is what I use on vacation. It's always in my beach bag.
On the topics of products that you love, if you could narrow it down to like 3 products that you like would be your top favorite 3, what would you say?
I think I would have to pick a gentle face wash because that would be something that like almost anybody could use. I like my CeraVe hydrating cream to foam one. It's like my ride or die. I can't live without it. It's like strong enough to remove makeup and waterproof sunscreen, but doesn't strip the skin. It's still very gentle. So I think that one would like come to the desert island with me. And then I think I'd have to pick a sunscreen, of course, to keep my skin protected. And then probably Aquaphor, because Aquaphor is the duct tape of dermatology. So you could do everything with it.
What sunscreen are you picking? Maybe like one for your body, one for your face.
For my face, it would be the Beauty of Joseon. It's a Korean beauty brand, actually. So they make, it's so beautiful. It's elegant. You can use that 3-finger length without it feeling disgusting on your skin. And it just is so weightless and not greasy, and it doesn't feel gross. So that one is my go-to for my face. That's what I wear daily. For my body, honestly, I really like the Coola sunscreens because they smell tropical. And when you're sitting in the sun sweating and feeling kind of gross, they make you smell amazing. Like people will be like, what are you wearing? And I'm like, it's my sunscreen. Thanks.
I'm a runner and I run outside all the time.
Yeah.
Is there a specific sunscreen that you'd recommend to somebody who maybe like sweats a little bit? If I'm not carrying something with me to reapply on a long run, might stay on my face a little bit better versus being worried about it sweating off or something like that?
Yes, 100%. So the specifically formulated water resistant sunscreens are going to be your best bet. These are often labeled like the sport sunscreens. They don't have to be though, but I would check your bottle. It's going to say on there what the water resistant rating is. And that means that that was tested in water without washing off for whatever that timeline may be. Most of them are going to say 80 minutes. Some of them are 2 hours. And using those is going to be your best bet because they're going to be more resistant to the sweat.
I'm gonna have to look for that.
What if you're old like me and you do not have the luxury of playing outside all day, but you have to work? So you have to be inside. I put my SPF on in the morning. Do I have to reapply throughout the day? Do I have to reapply before I go for my evening run?
There was a cosmetic chemist who looked at this. I'll see if I can find the study. It's actually really fascinating. So she looked at the UV that comes through. I'm motioning this way because I have a big window right here. The UV that comes through a window and then how far it gets into the room. So the light that comes through the window, the glass filters out UVB, which is the rays that would burn you. So you never burn when you're sitting inside of a window. But UVA is the longer wavelength, and that's what causes damage and aging. So if you're concerned about aging and you want to keep your skin protected, you want to block the UVA as well. So if you're sitting by a big window and you can see your shadow, then it's probably worth it to wear your sunscreen even if you are indoors. If you are further than I think it was 6 feet from the window, or it has a curtain and you can't see your shadow, you don't need to wear it inside. Like the amount that kind of scatters beyond that point is pretty negligible. And unless you just wanted to be very, very cautious, I would say if you're indoors in that situation, like you don't need to. I'll tell you what I do. So in the morning before I leave for work, I put sunscreen on my face, neck, ears. I'm usually wearing my scrubs, and then I typically wear a jacket, especially in the morning when it's still chilly at this time of year. So I don't put it on my arms. My legs are covered. I'm wearing long pants. I drive to work. I work indoors. We have blinds on our windows. They are not such to the point that I'm really seeing my shadow. I don't reapply throughout the day. By 5 o'clock, typically the UV has dropped to less than 3. So when I'm leaving work, I'm not worried about reapplying it because the UV is lower than really the point where you want to keep that maximum protection. So like you can do the most and do it all, and that's fantastic, and I'll always support it. But I'm also a fan of being practical, and you have to do what works for you. And I'm not going to reapply sunscreen while I'm working indoors all day. But if I have a day off work and I'm going to the gym and then I'm running errands later in the day and I know I'm going to be outside, you're going to go take the baby for a walk mid-afternoon and you know you last applied at 7 or 8 a.m., I would probably reapply during those instances because that's where you'll get the most bang for your buck in terms of protection.
I could talk to you for 3 hours. We would love to have you back on. And like personally, I would love to have you back on because I have a ton of questions about like anti-aging and like products and like injectables and all of that stuff. And maybe we can do another episode on that because
yeah, I could probably ask you like 12 questions just off of like tretinoin. So we're definitely going to have you back on.
For sure.
Mercy, we have 4 ending questions that we ask all of our guests. It is the Eat More Carbs podcast. I know we didn't talk too much about nutrition today, but I would love to hear what your favorite carbohydrate is.
I struggle to answer this because I like so many carbs and I love a sandwich. So I wanted to be boring and just be like bread. But then I decided I'm going to go with an everything bagel because I cannot turn down an everything bagel and you could potentially make it into a sandwich. That's what I'm going with.
I love a bagel sandwich. I think they're underrated. What is your favorite pre-workout snack?
So I usually work out on my days off because I struggle with getting a workout in after my clinic days because I'm just tired and brain dead at the end of the day. So I usually do a latte in the morning. So I get my caffeine, I get a little sugar protein, and that's usually my pre-workout. If I am going after work, if I felt really motivated, then I'll do a protein bar when I'm leaving work on my way to the gym.
What is your favorite post-workout snack, meal, fuel?
Meal. So I work out in the morning. So I do my coffee, I have my workout, and then I'm eating my meal. And then same thing in the evening. If I'm going after work, I'm coming straight home and eating dinner. It is pretty rare if I'm not just going straight into a meal. If it's like a random Saturday afternoon and I'm just, I don't know, being super productive that day and I'm like, I'm going to the gym and then I'm going to do things, I'll drink like the Fairlife chocolate milk protein shake.
We love those.
Our last question seems to be the hardest question, but it has nothing to do with nutrition. It is, what is your favorite pair of kicks? We're big shoe people here.
So I wanted to know which category you were looking for. I have lots of
Okay, if you're
shoes.
going to your island, if you're going to your desert island and you're bringing, your sunscreen, you're bringing your bag, what shoes are we bringing?
If I'm going to an island, it's just going to be a pair of flip-flops. I actually really like the little ones from Tory Burch that are like, I guess just the old school, like leather strap foam bottom, and they're very comfortable for me. If I have to work out though, on my desert island, then I really like my Brooks. I actually looked to see which ones they were because I wasn't sure. The Brooks Ghost 14. I have them in 2 colors because I like them so much. Those are my favorite gym shoe.
We've heard a lot of Brooks, haven't we, Reilly?
We have. I feel like that might be the most popular running shoe that we've heard.
Yeah, I feel like everybody wears them. I see them all the time, but they're really comfortable.
Mercy, thank you so much for being on this episode of the Eat More Carbs podcast. We've so appreciated you sharing all of your tips about skin health, skin protection, sun protection, and everything like that. We're definitely going to have you back on to answer more questions because I know that was just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to all of the questions that even just Reilly and I have when it comes to keeping our skin healthy. For anyone who maybe wants to follow you on social media or find you, ask you questions, what is the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My social media, I'm primarily on Instagram. It's at Derm NP Mercy. So DERM NP, like Nurse Practitioner, Mercy, MERCY.
We are going to leave all of Mercy's contact information in the podcast show notes so that way you can find her social media and you can find out, like Reilly and I did, how much sunscreen you need to use for your face, your neck, and your ears every day to make sure you are protecting your skin. If you have questions for Reilly and I, you can leave them below, or you can find us on Instagram. We're at the Eat More Carbs podcast. You can find Reilly on Instagram at reilly.beatty.nutrition, and you can find me at jenna.fisher.nutrition. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Eat More Carbs podcast. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.